Thank you, Ben, for joining us. Uh, okay, tell me a little bit about you. What are you focusing right now, and your experience in cybersecurity and software development, everything in between?
First off, I'm Ben Christensen. I'm the chief mad scientist at Automators Solutions. We provide consulting services that basically tackle the hairiest problems that you can find, right? If you need something complex figured out, we're definitely the people that you want to talk to. I've been a practitioner and expert in the field for the last 15 years of security. I have automated 232 jobs to date, usually level ones in the security field. I've automated my job completely twice. I go by the nickname of the Automator simply because that's what people refer to me as after I automated my first 4 contractors when I was in an engagement. I have a vast skill set across all of the different development tools, usually scripting such as Python, Ruby, but I do pretty much any kind of tool and any kind of integration you can think of. Did that answer your question?
Yes, much more, and you give me more questions. Like, for example, well, what are level one situations in cybersecurity?
Sure. Okay, so in a general SOC, you're going to have level 1, level 2, and level 3 individuals. Level 1 is usually a triage type individual who is looking for information to enrich a incident that comes in that may have to end up doing some more arduous or manual tasks to try and provide more information. Once they reach a stopping point, whatever that is, according to the standard operating procedure, it gets escalated up to a level 2, usually to work. There are obviously cases, where the level 1 can resolve it out and say, no, this is a false positive. This is whatever. As far as the automation that I've done, mainly in the SOAR areas, which is security orchestration, automation, and remediation. It's basically a platform that allows you to mimic a lot of the activities that your SOC is doing. So, I've implemented SOAR platforms as well as rewritten a lot of different processes or added middleware that made it so that those level 1 individuals usually wouldn't have to, continue doing a lot of their functionality that is currently being done.
That activities in the level one are common if you are defending or attacking, as I guess. So if I am attacking a website, I will gather all the information that's possible. So with the thing that you're doing, that information will be limited. So we provide less information for attackers, and obviously make the attack more unaffordable. Or am I right? Or
Well, so what you're talking about is more like defense in general, right? What I am talking about is more incidents that happen based on a log that occurred, right? So the log creates a ticket. An individual looks at the ticket and they determine what's going on here, right? Like, do we have any possible incidents, or is this just another security event, right? Meaning,
okay.
Yeah. So, and then they just kind of work it through completion there. What you're talking about, though, is more hardening of the enterprise and defense, which I'm happy to go into if you'd like.
It will be great, because I think it's a topic very relevant nowadays, and we as developers if we have a little bit more vision or awareness about it, maybe, well, not
Sure.
maybe, we will do a better job.
Yeah.
Just a parenthesis. So an important part of the topic of our conversation is that the way in Xipe we see cybersecurity is more like a culture than a bunch of products that you can buy. It's not like,
For sure.
so if we are right under your point of view, okay.
Sure. Yeah. Well, okay. So let's address that in two parts, right? So first off, as a developer, developers should at least understand how their code is going to interact with the end user, whether that's a good person or what we refer to as a bad actor. Okay, and with that, they should probably understand the OWASP top 10, right? And OWASP is, an organization that provides the it provides basically the foundations of what security rules can be, what security rules are common, right? And the website is owasp.org, and security individuals use this to determine, what top attacks are going on, what are the main type of threats that could be impacting their business, right? And so, to the point of defense, generally, what you're going to want to do is make sure that if you're interacting with a database, for example, right, you would probably focus on, as a developer, making sure that your SQL statements are not able to be injected by an attacker, right? And what is an injection, right? So an injection happens when you interrupt the logic that is happening with, say, your select statement, right? If I select, if I say select Garfield from cats, right? And you say, no, as an attacker, I'm going to intercept that, and I want to show all of your usernames and passwords from the user field, for example. That is a form of SQL injection. And that would be one of the many types of exploit vectors that would be available for a developer to understand. So, in summary, knowing what the OWASP top 10 are and understanding briefly what the current top 10 vectors are will help to not only allow a developer to write more secure code, but possibly anticipate results that are coming from a vulnerability scan as well.
I see. And there is another kind of injections, right? Like PHP injections. And
sure.
Is cross-site scripting considered an injection, or is not?
I mean, it kind of depends on your definition or understanding of an injection, right? And so let's just say for in this case, it's the same in that you're interrupting the logic, right? Or you're overriding the logic of what is going on. And in a cross-site scripting, you are asking the end user to to actually reflect your attack payload for you, right? That would be a reflected cross-site scripting attack.
I see. Yeah. Sorry, it's just with academic purposes, not.
Of course, yeah. No, it's fine. It's totally fine. And you'll have to forgive me. I though I have been in security for 15 years, sometimes the definitions elude me because it's more example based in the work that I do.
No, it's completely natural, and especially if I am speaking about this vague terms, very
Right.
basic, and it was just a doubt that I got because I remember I was playing with the kinetics and I saw my a lot of injections
Right.
and then I saw the cross-site scripting and I see that I can alter the interface of the website, but it's not in the server. It was only me
Right.
watching it. So that was my question. No, just for the record, in case it's a paid version of Arconetics.
Awesome. Okay, so do you want me to dive into like cybersecurity culture and what are you kind of looking for there to help scope that, right? Because that's a very broad topic. So I want to make sure that I address what you're looking for.
The most relevant part for us as a company is the culture in the development.
Okay.
And here are my thoughts. Because when you see a digital product online, and who is developing the software, I think we became a part of that chain, that attack surface that we became person of interest if somebody's trying to hack that digital product. And usually when we're developing software, sometimes we are super relaxed with the secrets, with the keys, with some connection strings and everything like that in our code. And okay, if we are using GitHub or GitLab or one of those tools, the security level increase. But at the end, any vulnerability in the developer end can develop a breach.
Sure.
An attacker get the repository and that was a problem. So in that part of the culture, the part that I found most relevant is how to create a healthy culture between provider and customer when we are developing the software.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so let me preface that the attack surface that you had mentioned, right? Yes, it's going to get greater, meaning it's going to increase in the number of vectors available, or going to increase if there is additional exposure, right? If you're just writing, say, an internal app, there's still a very high attack surface, because if that app interacts with really really high severity or impact assets, right, or has the ability to do something that is aside from say read only or something, right? The level of scrutiny may be smaller there, as opposed to a full-blown e-commerce site with added ability. That being said, as a developer, usually the level of security that a developer is going to provide is going to be based on experience, first off, right? And it's also going to depend on the time frame, the estimate, or the project hours that are available. Obviously you try and should provide security as the first thought, right? But there are some cases where for say MVP, POC, there is a common argument vector there, right? Where it gives me digestive issues to say, oh, well, we're not going to worry about security. First, we just want to meet MVP, right? And the problem is that MVP then gets pushed to production. And
that thing will last forever.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. So, I mean, as far as that goes, you try to always develop in a secure way. Try to develop with concept least privilege in mind. Use service counts. As far as what you were talking about with GitHub and different things, right? A common problem or attack vector that you see is, hey, my secrets are inside of this file that says "don't look here" .text, right? And
Protected.
exactly, yeah, protected .text. And then that ends up being committed into a public GitHub, right? Which may include like an AWS secret or something along those lines. Very common attack vector, and really what it comes down to is training your individuals based on the platform that you have at your disposal, right? Chances are, if you're doing something, with a script, you'll probably have the ability to either inject it as an environment variable, which may or may not suit your needs. You could, inject it at runtime. Maybe pull it down from a different secrets provider like Vault. So there's lots of abilities there. But I think I've over-talked on that topic.
No, it is fine, because you mentioned something that is my favorite phrase. That is there is nothing more permanent than a temporary solution.
Right.
So if we build an MVP, and that thing will be the keystone for the next that we are building, because it's not like you will replace what is working and solving a problem with something new just because it's well built. That moment never comes for many products, and that moment never arrive. And I think that's an important approach of the agile methodology. You have an MVP and you start evolving from it, not replacing it every time you develop something new. So I think that's something super important. But now the topic with the AI is because we're using, for example, GitHub Copilot, and I remember a video of a guy who, I don't know how real this can be, but I was watching a video of YouTube that the guy was using his GitHub Copilot, and suddenly it creates that thing creates a function with some secrets of an AWS account, and the guy said, "Oh, let me see," and that thing was working, was alive. I don't know if you have some experience with with that kind of experience, or
yeah,
fake.
So, okay, so there are trusted providers providing AI all the time, right? And that's going to be a question for your compliance department or something along those lines. However, in general, I try not to provide the exact details of anything that I'm working on, and always use example use cases because of the retention limits of AI, right?
That's
So
a good one. It's a good tip.
yeah. Because even if it says that this is your data, I mean, you can look at I think it was Motorola had a firmware breach where they were using AI to refactor the firmware. They said, "Here is all my code. Refactor this to make it better," right? And
Make
then
it in Python.
Exactly. And then it appeared later in an example that someone found on the internet, and it was their firmware. So, that being said, I would say when you use AI, make sure both that you read the privacy policy and all of the policies for that AI. There are lots of individuals on LinkedIn that can, and do provide a lot of information about new AIs and how to look for common patterns and different things like that, right? How to secure it, how to whatever. And So I would recommend, some of those individuals. Also, anonymizing your data, but also like I am very hesitant to take my resume and upload it to Chat GPT, for example, right? It doesn't matter if I'm paying for Plus or whatever. I just, you know, I can't imagine a scenario where me uploading my resume isn't somehow used for their training. I have a 15-page resume. It would be a great training piece of information for one of those platforms. Um, so, so AI is great. We should, try and use it when appropriate and when your company allows it. But also, um, you know, the problem, right, is that as a new developer, you might not be able to say, hey, you know what? Write this in a class for me, right? As opposed to single line scripts, right? And so the only thing you can really do is try and provide instructions to the AI that says, hey, try and refactor this or recommend best practice improvements for what I'm writing. And hopefully then it'll allow you to learn from it. But that's one of the problems that my mentees have have encountered is how do I use Chat GPT to actually learn from from an example that I'm doing, right? Because it'll be happy to teach you the concepts of something, but what it won't do is necessarily tell you, hey, you could do this better unless you're telling it. Always make sure that you're helping me refactor or giving me a better way of doing this.
Totally agree, and thank you for your advices. Actually, that's something that it's interesting to have as a development shop. How to use ChatGPT efficiently without compromising the information of our code, and
right.
So something that I built was is useless now because it's in super early stage, but it's an application that for bypassing the prompt to ChatGPT and the response, just in order to have a log of what are we asking to the robot. At this point, we only have the log of our questions and the responses, but I think maybe something that may be interesting for you if you are analyzing logs and things like that to identify possible breaches. Maybe can be useful. Okay. But
yeah, I mean, if you could figure out how to get that log sent into into your sim to be able to analyze further, the hard part is going to be identifying a rule or some type of match that isn't going to be heavily regex based and create a whole bunch of false positives, right?
Yeah, the thing is, maybe at this point, we are just recording information that will be useful when something happens.
Yeah.
Not. It will be cool to have another AI, making the review of this, telling you, but nonsense. This prompt to ChatGPT is possible harmful.
Right.
Sincerely, Jama. So not. I think it's not the point, but maybe
sure.
the future is something that
maybe, yeah, maybe.
Let's see. And now the question, the main question is how the CEOs or CTOs will identify the moment of start investing or increase their investing in cybersecurity. Because at the beginning, maybe you can rely on your developers and the good practices and the basic culture of developing, and also the anonymity of your company in the internet. But
right.
I don't know.
Well,
some indicators.
It's so yeah. I mean, going from say a a pre-revenue stage to a post-revenue stage, right? That's when you really want to provide some level of scrutiny, is right before you start going into a revenue stage, right? Pre-revenue, you're going to have investors looking at everything. They're not going to be scrutinizing everything, but you don't want to release a insecure product, right? And you don't want to have known vulnerabilities like, hey, Joe left the SSH port for our company server internet accessible because we didn't know how to use a VPN, right? Very, very common things that you can see in in development shops like that is, publicly accessible, resources. Then you could also have things like default passwords, etc., right? And so anytime you're ready to go external, that's definitely a good time to start investing in cyber, right? And other factors, uncertainty, right? When your folks don't feel like they are comfortable doing XYZ thing, or the lift is too high to do something, right? You have a compliance body that you're going to be answering to, and no one at your company knows what PCI is aside from being able to spell it. That's probably a good time to start bringing in a GRC person, right?
Right.
There are signs of breach that could happen, right? You have an AWS environment. Everyone could have admin access, right? Early on, very common for a lot of businesses to just say, yeah, everybody can have admin. What's the worst that could happen, right?
And then the bills arrive,
Exactly. Right. So you have a bill, and there's there's some new service that nobody else has stood up that now you're responsible for, right? And so why does that matter? Well, generally speaking, you're not going to have really good practices, right? Most individuals are not going to think, oh, you know what, we should probably rotate out our keys based on some type of time frame, or you know what, maybe we should have different usernames for console access versus API. Maybe we should have service counts, roles, different things like that in the AWS world, right? But when your risk level is rising, right? When you start hiring outside of your trusted connections and referrals, that's also a really good time to to start considering that, right? Because you need somebody who has hopefully the mindset and the ability to protect your company, right? And I will say it. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Because is there any steps, for example, as you said, if you have less than 1 million users and your revenue is this, your investment would be around this, or not like that?
I mean, unfortunately, I don't have a formula for it, right? Like, I would say that if your revenue exceeds your risk, right? Looking at the normal CISP or CIA triad type approaches, where your risk mitigation could potentially take the company under, either from lack of insurance or whatever. I mean, that's a really good indicator, right? As far as how much revenue to how many people, it just kind of depends, right? Some companies are very lean. They may never get above 100 people, right? Or maybe they don't even get above 50.
I hope we can be one of those. Our business model is complicated, but we will find a way.
Yeah. But I would say when there's uncertainty like that, like, maybe we need a security person, maybe we don't. You could always look at like your common MSSPs to see if they can provide you some type of ad hoc or supportive services, right? Maybe you have a SIM in place, but you don't know how to monitor it. That's at least a small step, right? A small investment in your security is to have a third party watch your, watch the chickens in the hen house, or you know what I mean, right? They're trying to prevent the foxes from getting into the hen house, and if you're, if you don't know who a fox is, that's a problem. So, did that answer your question?
Yes, completely. And my question is because sometimes, especially when we work with, for example, healthcare companies, there is a lot of compliance. And this is compliance and cybersecurity are, in my opinion, the same problem, addressed differently.
Yeah.
One is from the legal perspective and taking care of the privacy, but well, cybersecurity is the way. With cybersecurity, is the way we protect the data,
right?
Beyond our own behavior, because yes, we can leak everything. And that's I think that for that we have contracts.
Yes, yeah, you usually have some type of form of insurance and contracts to help protect you, for sure.
Yes. Any recommendation with some especially vulnerable coding languages, or is not relevant?
I mean, I would say this, right? I'm a firm believer of using the right tool for the job, right? There are a lot of shops out there that would rather convert everything into, their native tongue, which makes sense, right? If it's going to be a heavily used and therefore needing support tool, right? But if you're going to have, a Go tool, for example, right, that you're just, it's like 4 lines of code. The conversion from that to a different tool to help make it secure, more secure than not. I mean, I don't know. It's fairly negligible there, right? As far as vulnerabilities, I mean, I think honestly it comes down to how you program, right? Because if the programmer doesn't understand how a vulnerability can happen, right, which hopefully you're doing things like really good code reviews. You have tools that are scanning your code at multiple stages, right? And you have a really good feedback loop, which is, a common DevOps principle. If you have those things, you're going to decrease the number of vulnerabilities. Now, I will say conversely that, less supported languages, right? If you start coding in COBOL, for example, okay, you're gonna have a time, right? You're gonna probably find a lot of vulnerabilities because the packages that are available have not been updated. They're not being looked after, right? So, does it make sense to go with this new version of JavaScript over the old version? I don't know. I mean, you have to weigh the ROI there, right? Are you going to have to convert all of the existing code? Can it just be bolted on? Is it supportable? What's the performance like? Are there any costs associated? There's multiple things to consider there.
Okay, thank you. Well, the last question that I have is something about the most dramatic cybersecurity anecdote you have, but maybe that could be a violation of your contract.
Yeah,
we can choose another question.
No, that's totally fine. All right, so I would say that one of the most dramatic cybersecurity things that happened for me was due to, leadership not understanding the blast radius of the change that they're requesting, right? So I was early on in my career. This was my first vulnerability management project, and I had to introduce ticketing, validation. Sorry, do you have a question?
No.
Okay. I had to introduce ticketing, validation. We were changing the entire way that this current program was working, and I was taking it on as a greenfield exercise early in my career. So I wanted to, impress my boss, get a bunch of accolades, a lot of attaboys, right? So I worked tirelessly, man. I taught myself Ruby. I worked on designs. I benchmarked everything, right? I created dry run code scenarios. We had meetings, emails, whiteboards, Post-it notes, right? Whatever I could do to get the point across, right? I made sure that my leadership and I were joined at the hip. But about, I don't know, couple minutes before we were getting ready to launch and the entire company knew exactly what we were doing, hey, you know what? Let's change the CVSS score from a medium all the way down to info. So depending on what you're talking about, this would be the vulnerability score of a vulnerability going all the way down from, say, a 4 or a 5 down to a 0 on a 9.9 or 10 scale. Okay? So what you're doing effectively is doubling the amount of work. Or so I thought. I was like, okay, we're going to double the amount of work. No big deal, right? I was very wrong. We created several million records in about 4 minutes. We ran out of disk space. I crashed the server. We had to bounce servers to bring them back online because I was DDoSing them with the parallel execution techniques that I was using. We had to kill the task server, and it had so many things in memory that it was still sending things out until we shut it down. And then we had to bounce the vulnerability server, which also went offline, right? So I did everything I set out to do, but I killed production in the process, right? I didn't have time to test and identify the problem. And even though I said, hey, I don't think this is a really good idea, but, I'm young in my career, so I'm willing to do whatever you say, right, boss? I that was still the outcome. So
I think we all have had a similar experience of saying yes when something in our head is saying us, say no, say no, say no. But you don't have maybe at the moment enough information or just confidence of saying no. And you see, okay, I can make this happen and I will shine like a star.
Exactly.
Totally the opposite. And at the end, it's not possible to say, hey, no, I knew it, but I just obeyed.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's a good one. I have one.
Yeah, let me hear it. I want to hear it.
We was building back in 2009. We were building something before people call it big data. We were organizing a lot of information from the trials on Mexico. Most of the tribunals, they didn't have the website to publish their trial results, which is public information. So what we did is to get an agent on each city, and they pick up the CDs and send it to our city. So we take the information, we organize it, and we sell it organized for lawyers. So if you're the lawyer of X case and you want to see the update without going to there, you pay me like $10 and I will give you the report. That's super fine.
Mm-hmm.
And our business was growing. in a very interesting way. And one of our developers arrived one day and told me, I don't know if all these purchases are real or are not real. And I said, let me see. No, they seem legit. The bank, yeah, the money is over there. Yes, are just 100 sales. So it is fine. But the same day, the same.
Oh no!
And our boss, or well, the partners were super happy. Yes, we're selling a lot and we're growing. And congratulations to the development team and the marketing team. And something in my head was, I was thinking, yes, it seems legit. The money is there.
Right.
Somebody's paying, but this bulk of things are happening at the same time, same size. It's curious. So at the end, the bank blocked our account and we can't receive payments anymore. We're not using PayPal or something like that because that thing didn't exist in Mexico at the time. So we're connected directly to the bank, and then the bank said, "Hey, you exceed the fraud limit."
Oh wow!
I think that was I don't know, some hackers with unknown purposes start buying the information with the stolen credit card.
Yep.
And we did all the work for them to organize the trials and organize the information,
Right.
and everything like that. And these guys created the database from us. I was like, when I saw the log of the purchases, something told me, but it was my first job as well. And I said, sales are sales. While we're getting the money in, we're fine. With that mistake took us out of the business for 3 months until we make everything right with the bank again.
Wow. Did you have to get any kind of compliance or anything? Did you have to go through like a PCI compliance audit or anything like that? Or
we solved it. We solved it in a very cowboy way, because my first job, and suddenly I was in charge of the development team. And the development team were my friends of the school, so nobody had a clue of what happening, or what is legal, or what options exist in the market. Nothing. So what we did is, okay, if the behavior is like this, block the third payment in this pattern, block it. And we start creating a lot of rules, and this it worked. But honestly, the sales fell down significantly, not only because the bulk, but some regular users start falling into that exceptions that we just had on our own. And that was the start of the end, the beginning of the end of that project. But we survived enough. The tribunals started getting their own internet connections, their own websites, and suddenly the business become less relevant. But we did everything like cowboys,
So much so, yes.
So that's it. I want to thank you for your time.
Absolutely. This was fun.
Just as a reference, and anytime we find the opportunity, we will recommend your service and your company.
Sure.
It was
awesome.
A really pleasure to
yeah, man.